Hi, everybody. Welcome to the PC Perspective Podcast. This is 146 for March 17th, 2011. I'm Ryan Shrout.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Josh Walrath.
And I'm Al Malventano.
Don't I look tanner? And is anybody going to say anything about, wow, what a great tan you got, Ryan?
Ginger's no tan. What are you saying?
Glow.
No, just like me.
Yeah, you didn't get any sun. What'd you do?
Well, I got sun. I just had a lot of sunscreen on because I don't like to become a lobster. But the vacation is over. It is back to the slave work that is reviewing hardware and graphics cards and talking with all of the three of you, that type of stuff. So hopefully I didn't listen to the show because Jeremy always tells me not to listen to the shows that I'm not on because I will likely want to get rid of everybody. So I just figured
it's for your health. We don't want you to have a heart attack.
So we'll just jump right into this week's news and information, starting with as we record this, it is Wednesday night. Technically, you still have about 12 hours if you're listening to this live to go to PCPer.com, look for the news post that's titled March Madness at PC Perspective. Sign up for our CBS Sports March Madness bracket group, and you can win some wonderful prizes. I haven't really decided what those prizes are yet, but I've got lots of stuff here kind of sitting around. We got graphics cards. We've got maybe an AMD Fusion motherboard.
Oh.
Yeah. We've got lots of graphics cards, probably a couple of Sandy Bridge motherboards as well. Some new B3 revisions are coming in. So if you sign up there, we're going to give prizes out to first place, second place, and third place. Anybody who's on this podcast and myself and anybody who works for me is not – you can enter for fun, but you're not going to win. So just put that out there first.
You see, I'm already winning because I get to write for you. It's so full of win and tiger's blood.
Nice. So you can go and sign up for that. It does. I think you have to sign up before the first game Thursday, which I think is like at noon Eastern time or 12:30 Eastern time. So if you're listening to this and you downloaded it, chances are you're still too late or you're already too late. So, but if not, go ahead and quickly give it a try. Sign up. It's fun. Win prizes. I enjoy it, and you get bonus points if you pick Kentucky to win, even if they don't actually win. So. We'll leave it at that. Also, speaking of Tiger's Blood and being warlocks, I think I'm going to go to the Charlie Sheen show in Columbus on April 5th. So if anybody, I have to see this in person. I don't think he'll actually show up to any of these personally, but I need to see this train wreck up close, and it's worth $40 to me to go to this. So if anybody is in the Columbus, Ohio area and is planning on going to that, I will be there. And we can laugh at drug addicts together. It's the 6th, apparently, I'm told. Whatever. It's one of those days. Look it up on Ticketmaster. And it's apparently also Ken's birthday. Just to celebrate his birthday, we're going to go.
Happy birthday, Ken.
Watch a Warlock.
Yeah, you can.
A real-life one. Let's talk about some hardware and stuff, I guess, since we kind of do that sometimes. First thing up, I'll just point you guys to a review of the Toshiba Satellite C655D notebook. This is a notebook I kind of previewed and showed off a little bit on a podcast a few months ago. I just did a couple of quick benchmarks and a little bit of hands-on time. But Matt Smith, who's our exceptional mobility writer, did a full review of this. This is an AMD E240 Fusion APU-based notebook. And not to spoil the whole story, but because it is an E240, which is a single-core 1.5 gigahertz APU, and it comes with a fairly large screen. It's a 15.6-inch screen, so this is a full-size laptop. We're talking 1366 by 768 resolution, Windows 7 Home Premium 64-bit. It's a full machine, but it's extremely low cost is the benefit here. We picked it up at Best Buy for $349, which is about as cheap as you can get a computer these days. Battery life was pretty good. 5.5 hours doing basic reading and that kind of stuff, almost 5 hours with continuous Wi-Fi usage, that type of thing. It's not outstanding, but pretty good, especially, again, for a $349 machine. The problem is its performance. If you're going to do anything on it, that even watching like this iteration of it, at least, even watching high-definition YouTube video was a problem. It was pretty choppy. The version of Flash 10.2 was not properly recognizing the Fusion APU. AMD says that will be fixed. If it hasn't been fixed already, there's about a 7 to 10 day lag between the time he finished writing this to when the publication went up. So we'll check back on that. It's a pretty well built machine. It's got a full size keyboard, number pad, all that kind of stuff. So if you're looking for maybe a computer for your mom or your sister or your wife or somebody that doesn't do anything except check email, maybe check Facebook, you can pick up one of these brand new for like $350 at Best Buy. So give that a look. I think it's worth it. The other interesting thing that's happened this week is we've had the launch of a new graphics chip. This is the MSI N50
Dinner Plate Edition.
Yeah, it does. It looks.
Yeah,
it reminds me
heck?
of a Batarang. It has these weird shapes to it. They call this the Cyclone 2 cooler, I guess. Right? It definitely reminds me of like a Batman utility belt type item. You could definitely kill somebody with it, is what I'm saying.
Tell
These
Ken to
edges
keep his
up here.
fingers out of that one.
Yeah. The edges up here, like if he gets out of line, I could just, you could just hold it like this and just hack at him like that. So this is based on the GeForce GeForce GTX 550 Ti GPU. So it's a new GPU. It's GF116 was the code name for it, although I didn't really hear much building up about it. 192 shader processors, very, very similar in specifications to the GTX or the GTS 450 that came out based on the Fermi architecture already. So this is kind of just like let's take the 500 series, bring it down another price level. This particular card is going to sell for $159. It is overclocked slightly. Base clocks are 900 megahertz. This one runs at 950 megahertz, so just a little bit overclocked on there. With this type of cooler, though, you could definitely get some more out of it. Reference cards are apparently going to be selling for about $149. So the interesting thing about this card, which is a little unfortunate for NVIDIA, is that they compared it in their kind of presentation to the press and their kind of pitch to the media as, here's a card that's going to be it's got faster clocks than the GTS 450. It's more efficient. It has higher memory bandwidth. It's going to outperform it by a good, healthy 30%, 25%, something like that. And it's also faster than the Radeon HD 5770. The problem with that, of course, is that none of those cards are priced at $150 anymore. The GTS 450 you can actually buy for like $89 at Newegg today. So we expect and we would hope that the GTX 550 would be faster than the GTS 450, right? That just kind of goes without saying. And because of the price difference, it didn't really make a lot of sense. It's not even really in that same class of card anymore. And the 5770, I think you can find that for like, $120, $125 as well. So that's pretty, $25 isn't a huge price gap, but when we're talking about a card where that's, a sixth of the total price, now we're getting into where $25 one way or the other kind of matters. So the Radeon HD 5770 is a competitor, but it's a little bit lower cost. And then, unfortunately for the 550, what's also in its price range is the remaining GTX 460 graphics cards. Now, the NVIDIA GeForce GTX 460 cards came in a 1 gig and a 768 meg version, and then there was an SE model that was like 1 gig but with a smaller memory configuration or something weird like that.
Shaders.
Yeah, they alternated shaders for memory bus width, I think. But you can get a GTX 460 760 meg card, for about $139 to $149, which is dead on even with the price of the GTX 550. Performance-wise, the GTX 460, even in that 768 meg variant, the one that originally, or since their release, we've been kind of down on because the 1 gig model is even higher performing than that. Even that version of the 460 pretty much runs away from the GTX 550 in terms of overall performance, right? I was looking over a couple of these specific benchmarks here, but if we look at, let's say, Lost Planet 2, we'll see that at 19 by 12, we're talking about a difference of 25%, 20% faster. So with the GTX 460 compared to the 550 Ti, Civilization 5, we're seeing results similar to that, a little bit closer there. Battlefield Bad Company 2, another game, we're seeing, again, pretty good performance gains, a difference of 31 versus 39 frames per second, 8 frames per second there. We're talking about, again, 25-30% of the performance of that card you can get for the same price. So what that means is it doesn't make sense. If you're going to spend $149 on a card, this is not the best option. And it's not the best option because NVIDIA has better solutions out. There are older solutions, and obviously the issue there is eventually the GTX 460 will be end of life. It will no longer be for sale, and then we'll kind of be left with the 550 and that kind of and the 560 parts. This has happened to NVIDIA in a couple of instances. Hasn't it, Josh, recently? Like where they just release a new product and it doesn't make a lot of sense at the price they really release it at, and it's kind of like there's better parts from AMD and NVIDIA at that exact same price point. So why? Obviously, they knew this. They were releasing this card. They decided to do it anyway. They knew what the feedback was going to be, but they still wanted to push it out there. I mean, why do you think they would want to do something like that?
You know, it's a really good question because we saw this exact same thing with the GTS 450 when it was released. It was released at a price point that I believe was above the HD 5750 card, and the 5750 just smashed it. I mean, it just trashed the entire damn card, and it was not competitive. And it was a bad thing for NVIDIA, but you know, they're still selling cards, and certainly the market corrected itself in that now we can get a GTS 450 for much lower price than an HD 5750. And I think it's just, you know, it's a bit of a supply and demand that they know that with these initial cards, they're going to get people who are going to buy them at these prices, who buy into the hype and want the, you know, the brand new shinies. And they're helping to, you know, give NVIDIA money and all their partners to allow the price to lower for more reasonable people to actually go ahead and buy it. So, you know, I can't look into NVIDIA and figure out why they're doing what they're doing. Certainly, it would be better in terms of, you know, sentiment and logic to have it about $15 or $20 cheaper than what it is. I mean, it's still not a bad card, but
no,
it's just not competitive in a price-performance ratio. But I think within a month we're going to see, you know, a pretty good erosion of prices on the GTX 550s, and they'll start, you know, streaming out the GTS 450s. And you know, it's interesting. You look at a GTS 450 board. There are two memory module areas that are not populated with memory, and so obviously it had the ability to do 192-bit addressing. Well, not addressing, but it had a 192-bit memory bus on it as well, but they just never utilized it as such. And, I don't see any particular reason why they didn't, but I think that they just wanted that, you know, kind of separation of products and performance, and you know, at this point in time, I really like the GTS 450. I think it's a very good card for the price. It's right where it should be. It's an excellent introductory budget offering for a high-end, you know, anybody who wants to play any kind of gaming. You know, it's a good product, and so yeah, it's the GTX 550 Ti is just a little bit of a head scratcher because there's so many other options out there that really outperform it at the same price point. So yeah, I think within about a month we're going to see some real big price erosion that will put it more in line to what users expect and what the partners are willing to, you know, do with these cards.
Right. Yeah, and NVIDIA's CFO did just resign.
And it was all because of the GTX 550 Ti. Well, it's an insidious,
for personal reasons, but isn't it always for personal reasons?
I would hope so.
Well, he's probably got cancer and wants to actually get healthy. So
get on the Tiger's blood.
I would consider that a viable personal reason.
I would.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Another interesting kind of data point that I put in this review is, I know we always talk about if you just spend $20 more, you can get this. If you just spend $50 more, you can get this. So one of the other cards that I considered throwing in as comparison through the entirety of the benchmarks was the Radeon HD 6850 card. Now it sells for about $169 to $175, maybe as high as $180, depending on where you're looking for the base models. So I consider that to be, this MSI card is $160. For $15 to $20 more, you could get a base stock reference speed Radeon HD 6850 graphics card. And on page 13 of this review, I actually went through and kind of said, okay, if you're going to spend $20 more, this is what you can get over and above what we already showed you with the GTX 460 performance differences. And some of the gaps on this particular instance are really big, considering like F1 2010, you can go from 31 frames to 49 frames per second. That's a really big difference. Bad Company 2, you go from 31 frames to 48 frames per second at 1920 by 1200 resolution. Left 4 Dead 2, you get playable resolutions on both. Metro 2033, you go from 20 frames to 30 frames, so 50% average frame rate increase for that. For an additional $15 to $20 on your graphics card. And, we could probably do this with other cards that are $20 more. We could go up to the overclocked GTX 461 gigabyte cards, for example, and we would see the same thing. And that's part of the complication, and it's good and bad for this price, we'll call it range of graphics cards. You went from $100 to $200. There's so much competition there. You really have to pay attention. Like, if you want to make sure you're getting the best value for your dollar, frames per dollar, frames per second per dollar, you need to like check on prices every day type of thing. Like, you need to keep up with what's going on, because if suddenly the 550 GTX drops $15, like Josh is saying that it might, or it should, or it will, then it would become a much better part. So you've just got to kind of keep your eye on what all these different cards are doing. Obviously, pay attention to wonderful websites like PC Perspective and podcasts like this one, so you can always stay up to date. Now, before we move on to our ad break and another story from DOS, I did want to say, you guys talked about the 6990, I assume, last week in my absence, correct?
I
You know what
might
they
have
say
mentioned
about
it
assuming
passing.
things.
It's awesome. I don't really know.
Yes. No, that's a US.
It's super fast.
So you'll notice
Talk
in
to
our
us,
review-
Brian. You were the guy that had the hands on things.
on this
Tell us
card.
about it, because none of us have ever touched that kind of awesomeness.
Right. That's weird. So the card itself, obviously, but you talked about last week. You talked about the benchmarks and performance. Fastest single card available. Uses a lot of power. It gets really loud in some instances after we'd been using it for 2 or 3 hours, even on an open test bench. The fan, when it spins up to its kind of second level of speed, it gets fairly annoyingly loud. Great performing card. You notice we didn't do any overclocking tests with it in the initial review, and that was kind of the fault of AMD and the fault of me for going on vacation, I guess. But I did run some overclocking benchmarks on this. The stock clock is 830 megahertz on the clock speed, and you have this magical little switch up top that if you looked at the review, you'll see pictures of. And when you switch that, it goes into a higher voltage, higher clock, higher wattage mode. I think it goes from 375 watts to 450 watts consumption, and it goes from 830 to 880 megahertz, and I think the voltage goes from like 1.1 to 1.2 or 1.175, something like that, and that's supposed to open up a lot of overclocking headroom for it. Quick preview, I was only able to get 955 megahertz out of this card stable. I got it to run at like 975 and 1 gigahertz for a little bit, but inevitably after 25, 30 minutes of looping Metro 2033, it would crash. I would get the blue screen, reboot, all that kind of stuff. So it does do some overclocking, not dramatically. I mean, we're talking about a 10% or so boost 10 to 12% boost, and you can kind of estimate that to be about a 10% performance edge in games that are going to be GPU limited. But we'll have a little bit of write-up that looks at the noise levels and the overclocking capability sometime later this week. Hopefully tomorrow we'll have all that up before we start diving into the not very well-kept secret of whatever NVIDIA's dual GPU card options are going to be probably coming out very soon. So pretty cool card, though. I mean, you like the output, the support for 5 displays on one card. They decided not to go with the 6 mini DisplayPort connections because apparently they had too many people complaining about not being able to have at least one dual-link DVI straight connected to the card. So
they need to mainline that DVI.
Yeah, $699 is a lot of money for a graphics card, though. I mean, that's obviously kind of goes without saying. But, I mean, are they actually for sale? I haven't really checked since I've been back.
Yes, they are.
They are? And are they $699?
Depends, actually. I was browsing around for one, and if the internets will behave for a second here, I found it at...
I'm looking at Newegg.
709. So they're not down to MSRP
start at
yet.
709 and then go 734, 739, 749. So they're not quite at 699 yet. This is the problem with these cards.
$350 cheaper than two GTX 580s, which is its competitor.
Well, two GTX 570s outperforms
True.
them. So
and that comes in around the same price.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit less, actually, and that's what's kind of interesting for this. Obviously, you get benefits of a single card. You don't have to worry about heating issues in a lot of ways. So, yeah, a GTX 570 is going to run you like $350. So, yeah, about the exact same price, but it's going to perform a little bit better. So, depending on what the NVIDIA solution is, if it's two 570s, that kind of gives you an idea of what to expect. If it's two 580s, you might expect a little bit more. So, yeah. Obviously, if you're going to spend $700 on a graphics card, the rewards that go along with buying $700 graphics cards. So, we'll go on from there. First, we're gonna talk to Josh here in a second about Lucid Hydra technology. Before we do, we'll take a quick break to thank today's podcast sponsor. All right, we thank MSI for their support. Now, Josh. Josh.
Me?
You spent quite a lot of time testing for this particular article. Yeah, you. I think that's... Lucid Hydra.
Is that entirely obvious that it's talking about me?
Yeah, we got it.
Okay.
Yeah, not a problem. Lucid Hydra, for those people who don't remember or choose not to, is a hardware-software chip solution for multi-GPU graphics. The idea is you could take any graphics card. This is kind of an outlier example, but say you had a Radeon HD 6990. Just say you had one. And then...
1 of 10 people.
Your friend gave you a GTX 550 Ti, and you thought, man, obviously I'm going to use the 6990 over the 550, but what if I could just use both of them at the same time? Wouldn't that be awesome? And it would be able to give me, I don't know, let's say 5 to 10 frames per second more than the 6990 alone if I just added that in there. Now, you probably wouldn't do that because that would be a dumb example, but that
okay, I'm listening.
That's the idea, right? You could do cross-vendor multi-GPU scaling. You could do same-vendor multi-GPU scaling. You could do like a 6850 and a 5850. Or you could do a GTX 570 with a GTX 470. You'd be able to get scaling out of that. That's the idea. It never really has caught on a lot. We've talked about it a lot, I feel like, here on PC Perspective and on the podcast and that kind of stuff. You got to spend some time with the latest software revisions with an AMD-based ASUS Lucid Hydra-enabled motherboard. Why don't you tell us about what kind of results you saw there?
Well, the promise was great. They had some interesting algorithms that look like they seem to make a lot of sense, that they would really do a lot of load balancing on each individual frame in between two cards, composite the results, and allow you to achieve a lot better performance than just one single card. Even if you had wildly different cards, you would still see potentially a increase in performance. And certainly we don't expect to, slap in a 6990 and put it in an AMD 760 integrated motherboard and
Right.
expect to see anything in that. But when you're talking about, two high-end cards or even two mid-range cards that are from different generations or different manufacturers, they promised a lot. That you would see a tangible benefit from using these two cards in a Hydra environment. And it just doesn't work out that way. It's kind of unfortunate. I really wanted to find out a couple of big things from this review, and I took a couple of months of a lot of work to really make sure that I was doing this correctly, because the results just weren't there. And finally, after about 3 months of work, I finally had to just compile all of my data, put it into an article, and just kind of say how it was. My experience was not great. It wasn't horrible, wasn't horrific, any other bad thing, but it just wasn't great. I found out a couple of interesting things. And one of the first, one of the big things that I really wanted to see was how well multi-GPU NVIDIA cards would perform on this, because as you well know, the last AMD true, licensed chipset for SLI was the NVIDIA 980A, and that chip is 2+ years old. And from that time, we've gone to USB 3.0 implementations that are done by a separate chip. We have SATA 6 implementations on the AMD side that are pretty pervasive with the AMD 800 series. And the 980A and the 750A chips have just stagnated. I mean, they're still for sale. You can find them. If you really want a native SLI solution, these are the ones to get if you want to keep with an AMD CPU.
Right.
Unfortunately, you're just not going to get the USB 3.0 and the SATA 6 and some of the other interesting things that have gone on, like better cooling, larger and wider power phase arrays, and other kind of interesting features that make a modern motherboard a modern motherboard. And so I wanted to take a look and see how Hydra did with these multiple GPUs on the NVIDIA side. And Asus was very, very kind, and they provided me with a bunch of boards. And if you go to the article, you'll see the whole stack of video cards and motherboard that they sent to allow me to really get an in-depth look at Hydra. And I was very excited about it. I thought that it had the potential. We saw MSI and Asus jump on board the Hydra. We then heard about Intel getting Virtu going, which is another Lucid type technology that allows you to run the Sandy Bridge with an external video card both together and get the advantages of both. And from your testing, it works very well, does it not?
It works.
Maybe not well, but it works.
It works pretty well. We had an issue with an AMD driver not allowing the secondary card to downclock all the way, like it was running at the max clock speed the whole time, or the mid clock speed the whole time, kind of affected performance. But I do not think that was related to the Lucid Virtu software at all. I think that was an 11.2 AMD driver issue.
Okay. But anyway, this is all money going in to the people at Lucid. I mean, they've had very few customers up until just about 6 months ago, where we saw a small explosion of parts that featured the Lucid technology. And again, the Virtu is huge for Lucid, because a lot of motherboard manufacturers are going to be licensing out this product and bundling with the motherboards that they sell to end users and to OEMs. So this is a good thing, and hopefully Lucid can hire a lot more software developers and engineers, because their product just isn't there yet. I remember back in, let's say, 2004, 2005, I was given my first SLI setup. It was a pair of 6800 GT video cards from NVIDIA, and I ran in an older, MSI K8 N Platinum edition, and it was a good board, and I ran that, and I just was not impressed because the amount of scaling in a lot of very, very common programs like Doom 3 or Half-Life 2 or the benchmarks at the time, it showed a great amount of scaling. But then you throw some older applications at them that still required a lot of GPU horsepower, or you wanted to run them at higher resolutions and anti-aliasing settings. I mean, it wouldn't be that much faster than a single card. Well, fast forward to 2011, and we see these massive increases in both Crossfire and SLI from a single card, and it's a very, very mature technology. Hydra, unfortunately, is just not at that point. And so throughout most of the testing, we were able to see on the AMD side, I wanted to take a look and see how Hydra compared to a native Crossfire solution versus the Hydra A mode, which is the AMD based multi-GPU for Hydra. And I took two HD 5870s, and throughout every single one of the tests except for one, Crossfire just, spanked the snot out of Hydra. And Hydra was able to show, a 5 or 10% increase in performance from a single card, but it certainly did not scale nearly the amount that a native Crossfire solution did. And because this Asus board is an 890 FX based board, you could still do the native Crossfire. But because of the way that NVIDIA has kind of reacted to AMD entering the graphics market by buying ATI, AMD kind of pushing NVIDIA out of the chipset market by, just having razor-thin margins on AMD's chipsets versus what NVIDIA could do, I think there was not a whole lot of love lost in between NVIDIA and AMD at this point.
Sure.
And so they haven't developed anything else. They haven't licensed out the SLI technology as they have done for Intel and their i7 and i5 series of chips and the supporting motherboards for that. And so AMD users have just been kind of stuck. I mean, if they want to keep with AMD CPUs, but they want NVIDIA video cards, if they wanted to go multi-GPU, they're kind of out of luck. And so the scaling on the AMD side was pretty good. The scaling of Hydra on the NVIDIA side was pretty poor. I mean, we saw an increase in performance on Hydra on the NVIDIA side with 3D Mark, Vantage, and I believe Far Cry 2. Other than that, it acted as a decelerator in most of the cases. And so you had two cards, and it was less performance in not just average frame rate, but minimum frame rate than just a single card. And the other thing that we found out about this is because of the way that Hydra composites the finalized frame on the main card, it takes up a lot more memory. So cards that had less than 1 gigabyte of memory really took a hit. I tested out a GTX 460 768 megabyte card.
Right.
And the amount of stuttering in the game, even though the average frame rate was decent, the amount of actual stuttering was impressive. And in some of the other benchmarks, we actually saw a pretty significant decrease in overall performance because it had less frame buffer. And when we compared that to a GTX 460 1 gigabyte card, a lot of that stuttering was gone, and the average frame rates were a lot smoother, and the minimum frame rates were much higher. And so what we can gather from all this is that the potential is there just by looking at the synthetic benchmarks and the other video games that are more commonly used as a benchmark, like Far Cry 2, we see these nice performance gains. I mean, the potential is there, but they just don't have the software stack and the driver developers in their own office to make this universally good as compared to what AMD is able to do with Crossfire and really what NVIDIA has really excelled at with SLI. So in closing in all this, Hydra still has a ways to go. It's an interesting technology. They could do some really good things with it, and we just haven't seen that potential reached, which is unfortunately both for users and for AMD, because so far this is the only way you can run multiple NVIDIA video cards in a modern motherboard platform for the AMD side. Now, I did talk to Tom Peterson at NVIDIA, and they weren't willing to give me a concrete answer on this, but basically said that if the performance of next-generation CPUs from AMD is there and the demand is there for multi-GPU solutions on the AMD platform, NVIDIA will help and give their customers a choice to run these applications. So if Bulldozer comes out and it really does compete with the i7, then I think we might see a little bit of leeway here with NVIDIA in giving AMD the ability to license out SLI on perhaps their high-end boards. And so that's something we're kind of holding our breath with and hoping will come to happen, but we're just not sure yet. And certainly we're waiting for Bulldozer to come out the doors and hopefully blow us away. And if not, well, if you're going to want SLI, you're going to want to buy an Intel board.
Yeah, unfortunately, that is the case for at least a while longer. And it's sad to see that about Lucid because, like you were saying, we both kind of had, I don't know, hopes for it, saw potential for it, that type of thing. So, let's see. Let's get into a couple of interesting news bits. Alan, are you awake?
That I am.
All right, there we go. Let's talk a little bit about an interesting twist in the world of solid-state drives. OCZ Technology acquiring an SSD controller company. First, just to say, so OCZ is an SSD vendor, and I would say they're probably the most aggressive SSD vendor in terms of being the first to release new products, being the most aggressive in pricing, being the most kind of forward-looking in terms of adopting multiple controller types. They had IndyLinks. They had the other ones like SandForce. They did do JMicron at one point. That was kind of like when SSDs were first kind of catching on.
They even did Samsung.
Did they? Okay. So, I mean, they kind of covered all their bases, right? And that was kind of one of the things about OCZ that I personally was a fan of, was that you could go there and you could say, okay, the Vertex line has this controller, this line has this controller, this line has this controller. However, they announced this week that they are going to purchase IndyLinks, the maker of the Barefoot brand SSD controllers. I guess, what kind of background, what do you think about this? What good is this for consumers? What bad is this for consumers?
Well, we're not going to know all of the goods or bads until everything unfolds, and that's just something we're going to have to watch, unfortunately. We do know some things that came out in webcasts shortly after this announcement, and that is everything's not going to get shaken up like right away, right? So OCZ is not buying IndyLinks so that they can shut out all the competition or anything like that. IndyLinks is still going to make controllers. Competing solid-state drives may very well have them in them. It's basically up to the competition if they want to still buy from IndyLinks. So that's their game.
Right.
And IndyLinks is not necessarily just going to have a hard time just because of this, say, for example, if that competition stops buying from them, because IndyLinks does supply to OEMs and other sources, and probably a fair chunk of what they supply to was OCZ itself in the first place. So not necessarily like immediate shakeups going on due to this, but probably long term we're going to see some other things. Because IndyLinks does have other controllers on the pipeline. It's my first, in the back of my mind, thought when I heard this was, well, wait, why are they doing that? Because IndyLinks controller wasn't really that great, and it's kind of dated, that sort of thing. But there's other controllers that they're working on that have yet to be released, and this is potentially a pretty good move just from that aspect alone. Because if OCZ was already going to be buying a good chunk of those newer controllers, now with the acquisition under their belt, they're going to be paying an awful lot less than what anybody else or even OCZ, without the acquisition would have to pay. Right, you're talking die cost of that controller chip versus whatever the packaged cost would be to, whatever they were shipping for. So, I mean, just to throw guesses out there, you're talking like $10 to $15 for an SSD controller, usually for the chip, versus just the die cost, probably be like, I don't know, $3 to $5, something like that. So you're talking a really big chunk off of the price of something that, is really the only other upfront cost other than just the flash memory cost, right? So if you can shave $10 off of every single SSD, that's either going to up your margin or it's going to let you drop your prices down a little bit better versus anybody else out there, other than the people that are making their own controllers, right? So the comparison here, the comparison here is there's some Toshiba SSDs that have their own controller. It's not that popular. Probably the most popular one of this kind of a combination is Samsung. But then again, their controller is, I don't know, I'd sort of put it on par with IndieLink's, honestly, performance-wise, right? It's not a SandForce and it's not an Intel, right? You can't really put it up there. But still, decent controller. People do buy these things. It doesn't, they're not so bad that people aren't buying them. They're usually out there for a much cheaper cost, as compared with the higher performing models. And they do the job, right? They get the job done and they work. So I wouldn't say it was so much of an unexpected thing. I was expecting OCZ to do something, because they always seem to be like reaching out and grabbing something. They're like the first guys to go crazy with putting SandForces and RAID Zeros, like 4 SandForce controllers on one PCI Express board, and come up with something crazy like a Revo drive. And they're always coming up with these really crazy off the wall things. And I knew that would eventually just have to lead to them buying somebody. So that they can just have their own controllers. Because up till now, it's just always been, they make all these different solutions to have all these different combinations of controllers, but they still have to buy all those from other people.
So here's a couple of thoughts and questions I have, because a lot of the questions I had on Twitter were about, is this good or bad for consumers? First thought, we're not talking about next week, but let's talk about 6 months from now. Will OCZ still make SSDs with other controllers other than IndieLinks?
The answer to that, from my understanding, is yes. And I don't see...
This is what they're telling you, not...
Yeah, this was from the webcast, actually.
Okay.
And the point I can go off of that was they specifically spoke to the fact that they intend to continue on with SandForce. So at a minimum, we know that they're moving forward with SandForce, and they're not going to just drop that. To that, I would ask, if you're going to use, why bother buying one? That's my concern. That's why I think that eventually this will lead to an exclusive. It's like, why would AMD want to put NVIDIA chips in systems that they were selling? That's a bad example because they don't sell systems, but you know what I mean? Here's where I think they're going and why. Okay. First of all, a good chunk of OCC's product line / profit margin, all that, comes from their enterprise class products. Okay. And IndieLinks does not make an enterprise class controller. Where the IndieLinks comes into play is the OEM, lower end consumer grade, that sort of thing. So if anything, this specific purchase, this acquisition, is going to help them basically increase their margins on those and get their prices down on those, right? So it's helping them there. But again, we haven't seen this new IndieLinks controller. We have no idea how it's going to perform compared to SandForce and even Intel controllers. I would sort of be shocked if I saw IndieLinks come out that strong, where they just all of a sudden, off the top rope, they're competing directly with the enterprise class products. So yeah, I think it's just a good move to have that under their belt. They can, they can breathe easier shipping large volumes of more consumer grade kind of products, and then they just stick with the bigger guns that they still have to buy. They still have to buy these SandForce controllers individually.
Right.
But I think they're doing just fine with that. Really, I don't see it changing. I just don't see them even 6 months from now. I don't see OCZ having nothing but IndieLinks based SSDs.
We do know, I would have to assume, that in 6 months we will see nobody else but OCZ offering IndieLinks products, IndieLinks-based products.
Perhaps. I don't know.
They say not. I know they said not on that call.
Well, no, they didn't say that. Where they went on that route was that's really up to whoever the competing vendors are. If they're still, IndieLinks is still going to sell to them, right? Because IndieLinks is they're still going to run their thing. It's not like everybody from IndieLinks is jumping on airplanes and they're packing all their stuff up and they're, completely just merging straight with OCZ, right? Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
I'm with you.
I know again, it's like, I know that's what they say, but in my heart
okay,
of hearts,
why wouldn't OCZ want to get a little bit of profit from every SSD that its competitor is selling?
Exactly.
I think the better question is why would OCZ's competitors ever buy from an IndieLinks company that is giving profit straight to their competitor?
Because IndieLinks
they don't have anything better.
IndieLinks still makes one of the cheaper controllers. Yeah, they've got a product. It's a very low cost product relative to the more expensive, higher grade stuff. And when you talk about shaving $5 to $10 off of each product shipped, when all you have to do is just change to a different controller, there are people that are going to do it. So just to run down the quick list, which is actually from the SSD decoder, you've got Corsair makes an Extreme. This is just IndieLinks specific, right? Corsair Extreme Series, Crucial M200 Series, G-Skill. They make two of them, two different models with those in them. Mushkin, Patriot makes two different models. Super Talent makes two different models. OCZ makes 6 different models. So, there you have like the who's buying the most of them, most likely, from that particular vendor kind of thing.
Right.
But yeah, there are other companies, and they're doing that. And some of those companies don't even have like a different controller in their lineup, right? They're just doing IndieLinks. Granted, that's changed recently. A lot of them do have SamForce, but
yeah, I don't know. I
don't know.
I think it's going to be more disruptive than most people would think. I don't know. It's kind of like when AMD bought ATI. As soon as the announcement was made, they had their press conferences and they had their conversations. Like, look, nothing's going to change. ATI is still going to be the same. We have long-term plans, but for now, they're still going to keep selling to this. And lo and behold, ATI no longer made ATI chipsets, right? And that's kind of the road that I would see happening here. I don't know. I also heard some just kind of like underneath the bleachers rumors that a lot of IndieLinks engineering talent, a lot of their designers and coders and that kind of stuff had already been kind of picked away and gone to other companies like Intel and SandForce. And so not a lot of that type of stuff is coming along with this deal. I don't know of the validity of any of that, but there's also some stuff.
I do know some of the patents went over in that deal.
Sure. Oh yeah, all of them would have.
So there's IP flying from towards OCZ on that, which hopefully they can use for something.
All right. You have anything else to add on that, or are we ready to move on?
We're just along for the ride to see how that plays out from now on, I guess.
Yep. Before we get to a few emails, there's one little other news post here titled "Tired of Waiting on a Dual GPU NVIDIA Card." The EVGA GTX 460 to win, and that is the actual name of a graphics card. The EVGA GeForce GTX 460 to win.
Now at least they don't have SSC after that. To win, super clocked.
Well, that's because it's not super clocked. It's actually running very, very not super clocked. So it's kind of a surprising thing to see. I guess we saw kind of engineering mock-ups of this at Computex last year, so last June. The idea is that EVGA took the GTX 460 GPU that was very popular, still is very popular, low cost now. They designed a custom PCB around it. This is a large graphics card. I think it is 11.5 inches long, so almost as long as the as the Radeon HD 6990. It has a pair of GTX 460s on it. And then in terms of output configuration, it has 3 dual-link DVI outputs and a mini HDMI connection. This allows it to do 3D vision on a single graphics card. I believe this is the first time on an NVIDIA card this has happened. So you can do 3D vision or 3D vision surround. NVIDIA surround for the first time on one card. And you could also do 3D vision surround. It is running at basically stock frequencies. The GPU is at 700 megahertz. Memory is at 900 megahertz. 672 total processing cores. Is basically exactly that, a GTX 460 1 GB card doubled up on a single PCB. They did do some benchmarks. They have like some promotional, looking type benchmarks on their page. We took one of them and it compares the GTX 460 2-win to the GTX 580. And while the bar graph there makes it look like this is a significant difference, 20%, something like that, 15, 20%, it's actually a difference of about 3.5% if you actually dig down and look at the numbers. So we're talking about...
Yeah, it's like 5,700 versus 5,900
Yeah,
points.
Yeah. This is what creative...
We hate misleading graphs. Hate them.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, this is what creative graphing can do. It's great for your marketing team. It's bad for us.
Were those silly graphs that don't start at 0? Is that what they were doing?
Yeah,
starts at 5,000, ends at 6,000.
Yeah, it's just wrong.
So it's nothing wildly new necessarily in terms of technology. It's two GTX 460s, but it is on a single card. It is completely custom. This is not something that NVIDIA designed, according to what I've been able to find out. No information on power consumption. I assume it's pretty much, it basically I've taken two graphics cards and smushed them together to make one 11.5-inch card. This is what you get. No information on pricing, no information on release dates. This card could be pretty interesting, even if that GTX 590 comes out relatively soon. This could still be a pretty good card if it's priced accordingly. If it's priced at the GTX 580 price point, maybe a little bit lower, this would be a good alternative, right? It's a single graphics card that is priced lower than whatever the GTX 590 will be priced at, and will allow you to do 4 displays out of a single graphics card, NVIDIA Surround out of a single graphics card, 3D Vision Surround out of a single graphics card if you want, and cost less money. So depending on what EVGA prices is that, it could be an interesting product. I emailed them about reviews and that kind of stuff. I haven't got any real information back on this. I'm kind of worried that this is one of those, we're going to make 100 of these types of cards. It's going to be priced at $599, something like that, which is way too high for the amount of performance that you're going to get out of it. It would make way more sense to get, if it's two GTX 461 gigs, let's assume those are about $190 a piece, maybe $200 if we're stretching it high for them. So we're talking about, at most, we're looking to pay $375, $400 for this card, for the convenience of having it all in one slot for your motherboard, that type of thing. So if they can keep that in that range or below, it could be interesting. Not for everybody.
You know what the main problem with this is?
No.
It's not going to be a big seller, and
No.
it eats up, I believe it's called the NRER, non-recurring engineering resources. So basically, you've designed this card around GTX 460s, which have been out for almost a year now. How are you going to implement this design with a next-generation product?
They're not.
Money down the drain.
Right.
Or are they just trying to dump 460s because they know that the 460s end winding very soon? They got a whole bunch of processors sitting there. So, come on, pull the soldering gun out. Grab 2 cards and put them on one here. It gives the product line a little bit more length.
I think that's actually a part of it, right? Is that NVIDIA probably has a lot of GTX 460s kind of sitting around. And they realized with the release of the 550 and the 560 that they need to start selling these. And if they can do so at a higher profit margin than just cutting the price on the 460 cards, that might work out better too. So I don't know. Like Josh is right. It's probably not going to be a huge seller. And it probably will be priced too high for us to really kind of appreciate it or to really accept it. So, all right,
if they want to send me one, I can certainly appreciate it.
You can even test it with Hydra if you want, right?
In the privacy of my own home.
It's gross. Let's jump into some emails. If you want to send us an email, podcast@pcper.com. We had quite a few of them here. I didn't get a chance to go through them all because I was out of town. We got a few in here. Also, voicemails, 1-888-38-PC-PER, toll-free, U.S. and Canada. Send us your questions, your comments, your criticisms. I actually got a couple of criticism emails this week. I'm going to pass those on to Josh because they're all about Josh. But
No. I've been
Jeremy,
talking way too much. My throat is very, very dry. I better drink some more beer.
Have some more beer. Jeremy, you want to take our first email here from John?
Oh, sir. From John, not Chad?
No, I moved things around. I refreshed it. So it's John about a new case. You can just scroll down.
Okay, well, John's got a question about a new
Started
case.
off, Dear John, I've met
Dear
another
John.
video card. Wait.
And
sorry.
I need a new case. You're just not big enough to hold.
You're not expandable enough for my needs.
Anyways, an email from John about a new case. Although he's a long-time reader-watcher, so he probably appreciated that. I'm upgrading from my old Antec 300 to a new case for my new Sandy Bridge system, which he's probably been waiting for a little while now. Yeah. I've worked it down to 3 cases. Money isn't really an issue. So what I'm hoping is you guys can give me my recommendations for your favorite cases out of the 3 and why you'd recommend it over the other 2. He's installing a Sapphire AMD HD 6970 and eventually a Corsair H70 self-contained water cooling. My main requirements are ease of cable management and thermal airflow. And you probably want a water cooling grommet so you can put the radiator outside of the case. Although the ones he's leaning to, the Corsair 600T or the Thermaltake Level 10 GT, do both have that. The third choice is Cooler Master ATCS 840. Any help that you can provide would be appreciated. Keep up the awesome work. Well, I've met the Thermaltake Level 10 GT in person, and it was a really impressive case with a lot going for it until I sort of, just to remind myself, hit the website today. And if you go and check out the Thermaltake Level 10 GT, you will be greeted with bad porn music. It's not something that I'd recommend. The case, on the other hand, not quite that bad, but so close. So
Burke,
very close.
cue it up, Burke. Where is he? He's probably
But
looking
it is
right
a
now.
solid case, and Josh and I did see it at CES, and
Without the porn music.
without the
Thank
porn music.
the Lord.
Disappointing.
Yes. Although it was in Vegas.
It was.
Yes. So there were 2 suites down where we did see Charlie Sheen and a bunch of porn music, but that's another story altogether.
Yeah. And he wasn't winning at that point.
He was not winning
either.
but he was ahead of the game.
So anyone else? Oh, yeah, here it comes.
Oh, you have to skip that part.
Cool car sounds, though.
Yeah, it sort of fools you into maybe that they've got some sort of an idea.
Oh, you're so bad.
We just gotta let that go for the rest of the email.
So up until I hit that website, I would have recommended the Level 10. I'm now leaning towards the Corsair product.
I actually like the Corsair. He says money no object, right? So I like
press that accelerator harder.
Well, that whole thing with the Level 10 case was the BMW, whatever.
Yeah, well, BMWs don't have a big enough back seat to, what were you saying?
Yeah.
Anyway, he mentions the Corsair 600T here. I would tell him to look up the 700D and the 800D if he's looking for something like full size, because the 700D and the 800D are essentially the same thing. Although the 800D has hot swappable hard drive bays at the front, the 700D does not. 700D also comes with a window optional on it as well. Both of those are really, really nice cases. They're expensive, but he says that if money is not the issue, then there you go. I would try that.
Hey, you know what? If you really like cooling and you don't care about things like hot swappable bays, the Raven 002 is a fantastic case. I've been using that as the basis of a lot of my testing, and it is tremendous. It's expensive. They do have a new version out that has easier to access hard drive bays, but boy, I'm seriously tempted to get that for my main machine because it really, really is a wonderful and well-designed case.
But they won't be hot swappable.
Not hot swappable.
Since Josh, why don't you take our second email here and read that off?
Can you play that music while I read the email?
Oh, he is.
Email from Chad about SSD speed and capacity? Is there an increase in speed in SSDs as they increase in capacity for the same product line, i.e. the Vertex 2 line is 240 gigabyte faster than 220 gigabyte? Is 120 gigabyte faster than 60 gigabyte? I've noticed in benchmarks that how some product lines are. Is that the typical case for all product lines? Great podcast.
Well done, sir. Well done. I'm sure we'll have further requests.
I love how
for that
as soon as you get to the part about speed, speed, the engine revs. Right.
Exactly.
That was perfect.
What is the answer to this question, Alan? The answer is somewhat yes.
Yeah, the answer. Well, it depends on. Okay, so it depends on the controller type.
Right.
Different controller
Depends on
types
how
have a
it
different
uses
number
it.
of. Huh? What?
It depends on how it uses the controller, not the size.
Yeah, it's not about the size of the controller; it's how you use it. Oh dear Lord, Burke! I so owe you some drinks next time I'm in California, man. All right. So here's how it works. You have the older Intel controllers that had 10 channels. Now, that's not the most recent ones. The 510 has 8 channels. And most every other controller that's out there has 8 channels. There's some minor exceptions, like ND-Link's is actually 4 physical channels, but it sort of acts like 8. But basically, it's all about how many different data paths you have to the flash memory from the controller and how that flash memory is oriented. So what happens is, a lot of the times if you try to go all the way down to like the minimum capacity of whatever that given product line is, they have to cut the number of channels because they can't buy the flash memory. It just think about when you're buying like a hard drive, there's that sweet spot in like the capacity versus
Sweet spot.
Yes, sweet spot.
Music now.
Oh, we're still losing it. So there's that sweet spot on cost per capacity, but the same thing applies to flash memory chips. And the vendors know that, right? The guys making the solid-state drives know that. So they're not going to buy a bunch of really small capacity chips just so that they can populate all of those channels. They'd rather go for the more cost-effective route, but that ends up knocking off some of the speed. So the whole reason you see that reduction, which to answer the question, yes, you do see a reduction in speed, and you also see a reduction in IOs per second, like your random access type performance. You're just seeing that because there's either less channels, less pathways to the flash memory, less virtual channels in the case where it's still 4 physical channels, but it wants to address. Basically, there's some methods where you can have a channel is actually just like a set of address lines and a set of data lines. Well, you can actually have one channel talking to multiple flash chips, right? It just addresses both chips, but it only asks for data from one and then it asks for data from the other, sort of like a multiplexing kind of thing. So anyhow, the long and short of it is, for all those reasons mentioned, you will
Did you just say long and short of it?
You did.
Just for you, Josh.
Music.
Right.
The long and short of it.
Awesome.
Oh, God.
Welcome back, Ryan.
I'll read this last
Do you
email.
really want me to read another email, Ryan?
Nope.
I mean,
Nope.
honestly. Okay.
Nope. I'm going to read this last one because it's going to be addressed to Alan. He'll have to answer it, so that way, let's get this out of the way. This email is from somebody named Ashwin about trim. Oh, God. About trim on the Mac. I just thought you guys should know that the latest MacBook Pro ship with a special build of OS X that has trim support. And he gave us a link to an Apple Insider article. This comes as great news to me because I just bought a new MacBook Pro and a 250 gig Intel 510 SSD to go with it. Would have preferred a Vertex 3, but can't find them for sale yet. So this isn't really a question, I guess. So it's an informational email Is this something you have read, verified, discussed, tested, Alan?
We haven't tested it personally. However, just across town from me, one of our motherboard editors, Steve Griever, has one of those nice, spiffy new MacBook Pros. And I have a whole bunch of solid-state drives with trim enabled over here. So as soon as we can get Wonder Twin powers to activate there, we will see. But yes, according to a bunch of reports from like everybody, then that new build of OS 10 that comes on the new MacBook Pros does have trim enabled, and presumably whatever solid state drive they're using, like their Apple is including when you do choose that option, probably is one that takes advantage of that to some degree. And just like Ashwin said, he just bought an Intel 510 series that he's going to put in there. And yes, that will definitely use and take advantage of trim as to a great benefit, actually, because if you don't use trim with that particular drive, it will slow down a little bit.
Trim.
Yes, I'm talking slow down now, Burke, not speed up, not right.
If that music doesn't slow you down, boy, I don't know what will.
Hey, baby.
And the car. We can add that music to our soundboard if we have one from now on, I guess.
Yeah.
We'll just cue that up all the time. All right, let's get the hell out of here. This is Hardware Software Picks of the Week. My pick of the week is actually an SSD. I stole this before Alan could write it down and put it in here. If you go to Amazon, or actually, here's the idea. Go to PC Perspective, this wonderful website, and refresh a bunch of times until you see the OCZ Vertex 2 banner along the sides. Click that, and it will take you to an Amazon.com link that will show you the OCZ Vertex 2 240 gig SSD selling for $379, which comes out to $1.58 per gigabyte, which is really, 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 really low. And the Vertex 2, as Alan will verify, is still a really, really good SSD. It's SATA 3.0 gigabit per second. It's not a SATA 6G drive, but still a really, really good SSD.
Yep, SandForce SSD, good stuff.
Yep. And at $1.58, that's probably the cheapest we've seen, like a new SSD, maybe even definitely a new SandForce SSD, probably a new one at all.
We've seen a J Micron based SSD.
Not that.
And that is a lot of money, but that is a 240 gig SSD.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, who's next?
Oh, that's probably me.
Yep.
I ran into something earlier this week called the Junkyard Jumbotron, which is actually a rather interesting way of setting up a huge multi-display on as many internet-enabled machines as you can find. You just log into a website from MIT, which has a website you go to, gives you a unique QR code to display on every single one of these things that you've gathered, be they tablets, cell phones, laptops, an internet-enabled TV, whatever. You line them all up, you go to the website, and you navigate to the link that they give you on each and every one of those devices. You take a picture of that and upload that to the MIT website. They'll give you something to add to a program that you download locally. You can now stream anything to those random assembly of displays, and it will act like it's one big display. Now, be you an artist, be you somebody who just wants, a really big game and can only afford 4 small TVs and not one big one because, they've been lying around for forever. Even if you just want to drive people nuts with one of those mix and match puzzles. It's a really interesting, easy way to get a whole bunch of just random displays to display one picture or one stream.
Well, isn't that clever?
It's free. Go download it. Give it a shot because they are testing it out right now.
Them kids at MIT are smart.
It's true.
Very cool. Josh, you have something for us?
All right. I'm a big fan of memory. Well, I thought we were going to see memory prices start increasing at this point. Apparently I'm wrong. Because right now you can get a pair of G.Skill 2x4 gigabyte DDR3 1600 at $888. 24 memory timings, all for $99 at Newegg. You go there, you enter a $30 off thing, $99 for a great set of memory modules.
8 gig, $100.
8 gigs for $100. Who would have thunk?
It's true.
That is cheap.
Yeah.
Like
If you want to be cheaper,
Just
though.
like me.
Plus, it's blue and fancy looking.
Yeah. Well, I found that, but if you want to actually be cheaper, go with 4 DIMMs instead of 2, which I just updated the leaderboard, so I've been chewing around all the sites.
4 is better
2
than 2.
gigs. So if a pair of 2 gigs running $1,600, once you do the $20 mail-in rebate, $30.
$30?
What?
$30.
What do you get for $30? Oh,
Corsair XMS 4 gig.
you get everything.
Nice. Lord,
Beginning
Lord
Courvoisier,
help us.
Burke. I could use that right now.
Alan, what do you have as your pick?
So my pick of the week, since I'm a storage guy, is
It's a motherboard.
Sandy Bridge motherboards that actually have working serial ATA ports on them,
Hey,
as noted by the B3 revision.
they were all working for you just fine before, right?
No, I was only using the 6 gig ports. I didn't even bother trying with the 3 gig ports. I'm not gonna waste my time with that. Come on, what kind of storage editor would I be if I tried plugging stuff into ports that might not work?
A lazy one.
Yes,
It's true.
that too.
All right. That's going to wrap up the show. Before we leave, I will remind you one more time, if you are watching this live, I'm sorry, and go to pcper.com and look for the March Madness news post where you can enter in to enter our bracket contest, win some prizes, have some fun. If you somebody in the chat room made sure I pointed out, if you choose Louisville to win, you do not win regardless if you're actually the winner, just so you know.
Isn't that a Big East team?
It is a Big East team, yeah.
Screw
Yeah.
you, Big East.
Yeah.
I'm just taking ECU.
No,
That
no,
too.
Burke. Nothing romantic about the Big East.
Yeah.
Not that kind of screwing.
If you want to email us, I'm sorry, the email address is podcast@pcper.com. 1-888-38-PCPer, toll-free phone number, U.S. and Canada. Call us and leave us your best porn joke or music collection or something like that. You can do any of those things or an actual question. It's totally up to you. If you want to share this show with others, pcper.com/podcast is the URL to do it. That's going to be it. We'll sign out. We'll see you next week. I'm Ryan Shrout.
My recommendation is sold out, so don't get the RAM. Go for Josh's. I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
And I'm Josh Walrath. Looking smooth.
And I'm Al Malventano.
Thanks for listening. And I'm sorry again.